This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to tonight's Storyworks Roundtable. We are talking about twists. What are they? Why are they so misunderstood? And Kathryn has a lot of questions for us. So,
so many questions.
We're going to dive in. Well, a twist essentially is a surprising change in a story that comes as a moment of shocking realization for the reader. So what the reader thought she knew is suddenly given new meaning. So a twist does not have to happen at the end of the book. It certainly can be a sudden change that leads us right into the climax. But it could happen really at anywhere in the second or third act of the book. And what makes a reveal a twist is that it has that reversal factor where the reader has to reassess, what does this mean? And what I thought I knew was wrong. So now I've got to, create a new understanding of the story or these characters in order to keep going forward in the story. So that's the difference between a twist and just a reveal. So, and I read my little definition from the Storyworks Guide to Writing Character.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
So you too can have this definition of a twist.
Yes. So if you thought, gee, it sounds like she's reading, I was reading from my own book there, because consistency is good. All right. So Kathryn, one of your questions, lead us off.
One of my questions was that I was running across a lot of people defining twists as basically what was a surprise ending. Mm-hmm. And when I think of surprise ending versus a twist, like you were saying, the twist makes you rethink everything, but a surprise ending doesn't always make you. So what's the difference between twist and surprise ending, and why is that so confusing to people?
Well, as I just said, the twist makes you rethink your understanding of the characters or the plot scenario. So it's that reversal. It's a twist. Like, think of a physical twist, like a corkscrew. You change direction with it. And a surprise ending might be exciting and delightful, but not have that aspect of reversal there, of making you reassess the who or the what is
so just
going
saying,
on in this story.
Wow, that was amazing does not mean that it was a twist.
Right. It's
not that complicated.
No, that's right. A twist should, I think, as Alida says, it should make you backtrack and realise that the conclusions that you've drawn, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, suddenly don't equal the number that you come up with at the end.
Right. Right.
So the conclusions that the author has forced you to draw and have made sense up until now, the twist then shows a different, whether it's a reversal or something tangential, so it provides a different maybe worldview or perception or whatever that sees a parallel line come through that then causes you to revise the sequence of events that have led up to what's happened now. That, in my view, anyway.
A different explanation or viewpoint of the events that had previously occurred.
Potentially, yeah, or the one that's just occurred. That so it causes you to reframe all the events that have happened so far, as Alida says. You redefine. When I'm writing, I like to change myself to write in I didn't see that coming moments, so I'll actually label them, and maybe when you're in your first draft, it's extremely heavy-handed because you think, it'd be great to have a betrayal here, no one would see that coming, but of course you have to make that believable and seed it in and make some of the actions early on in the story potentially ambiguous, but if you read it from the start, you wouldn't think so because it already fitted with the scenario. But by the time you get to the twist, you think, that's why they did that.
Right. Right. So we could say that every twist is a surprise, but not every surprise is a twist.
I think so.
And I just thought of an example. I'm going back to Harry Potter, so I feel like I should almost apologize for that.
The Universal Example Series.
I know, my God. But So if you think of Professor Snape, and at the end, as he's meeting his demise, so the fact that he was always a good guy is not a twist, because we knew that Dumbledore always trusted him, even though everybody suspected him of being a bad guy off and on, or at least some kind of double agent. We always had the sense that we were ultimately safe with him because he had Dumbledore's vote of confidence, right? So that is just confirmation. Maybe it was surprising to readers, maybe not. But if there's a twist in there, it's in the motivation piece, because we learn that he was in love with Harry's mother, and that really, as hard as he was on Harry, he was always looking out for him. So that's the piece that makes you go back and reassess all of his behavior, because it seemed like he never liked Harry, was always hard on Harry, had it in for Harry, but maybe all of that was a mask for the fact that he really cared about Harry. So
yeah,
does that help?
It wasn't really a twist. It's sort of built up as a twist, but it's, as you say, nothing about what our expectations were as a reader really necessarily changed, because you always hoped at some point, surely he's got to be the good guy. So maybe she kept us thinking, but Dumbledore trusts him. Surely he's got to be a good guy somewhere along the line. So if she hadn't have done that right at the end, then we definitely would have felt cheated if he had turned out to be a bad guy after all.
Right. Yeah, then we would have been upset for trusting him for so long. But yeah, so his being a good guy, not a twist. His being in love with Harry's mother, forcing us to rethink the way he really treated Harry and why, those behaviors, we could call that a small twist, because it does force us to go back. I certainly thought back on his behavior, like how many times he kind of punished Harry versus like the Quidditch match when he was saving Harry, doing the counter spells and stuff, and that motivation piece. So
okay, so what you're saying is that when you think of twists, they don't always have to be that massive, like thriller style plot twist that changes everything. It can be little character twists, subplot twists, etc., that can change the story.
Yeah, exactly. A twist changes the story for the reader. I think that's a great way to think of it.
Yeah, and sometimes you might guess it as well. So it's not, I think that's the skill of a murder mystery writer as well, is that they throw in twists that you think, oh yeah, I knew that was that dude. But then something later happens that's a twist. You think, oh God, I know, of course. So it's quite clever to sort of play the hands and tease the reader along with twists that are not so giantly obvious, but hinted at, that you think, oh, I bet this is going to happen, and it does. You go, see, right? And it's still a twist, but it's a predictable one, I suppose. And making those unpredictable ones that aren't just gimmicks, I think that's seriously good writing craft. When you're reading something and it catches your breath, or you get goosebumps or something, and you think, oh, it takes your breath away. Those are the twists I love. And I'm not saying every book should have them by any means, because they don't. You can have perfectly enjoyable books that don't have that element.
Right. I think most books don't. I think they're very hard to do well, because it is that causing someone to reassess something. Shutter Island is a great example of a twist by Dennis Lehane, because we go through the book believing that this protagonist is a police officer who's at an asylum on an island looking for a missing woman, and then the twist is that he's actually one of the asylum patients, and the doctors are role-playing this whole investigation with him to try to help him break through this block in his psyche, and the missing woman is his dead wife. So that forces you to reassess everything you've read, who all of the characters are, because now suddenly they're playing different roles in the story, what really happened to the woman, you know. So that's a great example of a truly shocking twist.
Right.
Where everything just becomes destabilized.
Yeah, and then, you know, if we're looking at something similar, where it was done as a movie with The Sixth Sense, and I do find that, you know, it was kind of fun once, but then it's a gimmick really at the end, because you really have to go back and watch and go, okay, that's how they did that subtly to make, you know, you never really was talking to anybody except the boy, etc. And so, yeah, okay, right, fine. You know,
well, I mean, I don't.
It was a gimmick.
Fair to say it's a gimmick just because you can't experience a twist more than once and have the same effect. You can't be surprised twice by the same twist. Once you know, you know.
But it's not a satisfying thing. Oh, right, okay, right.
Right.
So,
but it's,
you know,
the same.
there's no way I could have guessed that. Whereas I think a really satisfying twist is when you sort of go back and you think, oh, right, okay, I was completely misled. Look, I guess you in that movie you were completely misled. You know? I suppose some people realised it before the twist.
Right.
Whereas Shutter Island and Fight Club, for example, you know, examples where it is still kind of a gimmick. If you looked at what's the premise would sound as gimmicky as Sixth Sense. So maybe it's in the delivery is the difference there.
Well, and again, I think that I think calling twists a gimmick is almost like, I don't know, I just like downplaying the level of crazy
skill
that has to go into it. Yeah. But I think, like you saying, I think that on, you know, third or fourth or fifth, like if everybody knows what's going to happen, of course it's going to take away from it because they're building towards that twist and everything's kind of revolving around it. Whereas like if the first time it made you go, whoa, like I think it's worth, you know, and then you recommend it to everybody. Oh, did you see this or did you read that? Because you're never going to guess what happens.
That's right. The girl turns out to be a boy.
Right. I mean, like, and we saw this with Gone Girl, you know, just a few years ago. Like that, I mean, I read that book and promptly lent it to 3 of my coworkers. I mean, like, I couldn't tell them what happened, but I wanted to talk about it so bad.
And it was well done. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But I think, if I think about it, it's the difference between the gimmick and the twist is the gimmick is that all you're doing is building up to this gimmick, whereas the twist is, although it's an integral part of the story, it adds to the story. It isn't the reason for telling it. It's, you know, in Gone Girl, it really both of you go.
Kathryn and I both just did head tilts, like, we have to think about that one.
Anyway,
yeah, for our audio listeners. Well,
maybe what I mean is a gimmick is just a really low level twist.
So a gimmick is a poorly executed attempt at a twist. I think gimmick has value judgment that's very negative. I don't know if it's that way in Australia, but it definitely is in America. So I hesitate to keep using the word gimmick just because it's so full of baggage, you know.
It becomes a gimmick if you're advertising that your book has this amazing twist in order to get people to read it, and it's not that good. Then it's like a gimmick to get people to read it. But if you have a well-developed twist, then it's not a gimmick.
No.
Right. Well, and I think too, you might write a story purely because you want to write a story with a great twist. You know, we were talking in the inspiration episode about how stories can start with something as simple as, ooh, this would be fun to write, or as dramatic as a high concept, you know, epic thing. So you might say, I just want to try my hand at successfully crafting a story with a huge twist. And I don't know how Shutter Island or Fight Club got their start, you know, but that might be the premise.
It might be the inspiration.
There's this guy who thinks he's a cop solving a crime, but really he's a patient in an insane asylum. Ooh, that's a really intriguing idea.
That's right. But an idea is not a story. And so if you then write a story just to build up to the revelation of your idea, it's not satisfying. But if you take the idea and then craft it into a story with all its attendant conflicts and complications and plot points, then I think that's when I love it, when it's really well done, and the twist, a surprising twist comes in. And you go, oh, okay, that's taken me in another direction, and you didn't expect it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I have an example of a twist being used in a way that I thought was interesting that I want to make sure is actually a twist. So here's my next question.
Okay.
Coming at you.
Great.
Okay, so the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson uses a twist as an end hook. So when they defeat the first big bad that you think is going to save the world, it turns out that the big bad was actually protecting the world from something bigger and badder. And so instead of him being the evil thing that they thought that he was actually in a way a protector, and now they've released something bigger and worse onto the world. And so you have to rethink everything you know about the Lord Ruler, who they just killed, and go, oh, now what are they going to do? End of book 1. So that's interesting as a series. Again, it's really not the climax of the series. It kind of leads into the middle build of the trilogy in a way. But it twists the whole, so you have to rethink the whole book 1 in order to get into book 2 and understand what's going on.
Well, I haven't read that, but is it a twist or is it just a hook?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, is it a twist or a hook? Because it does turn everything that they've done on its head, like where they thought they were the good guys defeating the bad guy. And although it was a terrible society that they were in, it turns out that the bad guy who was controlling this terrible society was holding something even worse in check. And the only way he could do it was by being who he was. And so then when they kill him, you kind of have to wait, were they the good guys or the bad guys? Because now they've released something even worse onto the world.
Well, I think that meets our definition of twist because it does force you to reassess what you understood to be the story and the characters' roles in that story. So it would be a twist that is then functioning as a hook going into the next book.
Yeah. So now what are they going to do about it, kind of a thing?
It's kind of like I Am Legend, where at the end of the book, the protagonist, is tried and executed by the vampire zombie people for being this vigilante who's gone and killed them for years in their sleep. And so, you have to ask yourself, was he right all along just because he's one of us? Or, were the new society of the vampire people, maybe they're right. Maybe he's the monster and he's the outsider and the villain and deserves to die, but we were in his head. It was his point of view, and he's the normal human being. So of course we assumed all throughout the story that he was justified in killing the monsters whenever he could, it was kill or be killed. So of course he's right, and we're rooting for him to survive until the end. So there's a twist without the hook.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that brings up where should a twist be in a book? Is there a set amount of rules? Because with Gone Girl, I think that twist is exactly in the middle of the book, isn't it? It's the halfway point.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know about some of the other ones that you've mentioned, but where should a twist be, and how much of the book do you want to give? I mean, if it's a big plot level twist like that,
then it should go at the end. It's probably going to be right at the end of Act 2. So it's the second point of no return that leads us directly into the climax. So once you understand this, there's nowhere you can go except into the big climax. In Gone Girl, you have the twist is in the middle, but the book is in 3 parts, and the first 2 parts are 45%, and then the last part is just kind of the denouement when we see what happens after this couple is reunited. So you need that twist to happen where it does in order to deliver part 2. You can't, so for people who haven't read the book, part 1, you've got the husband protagonist, and the wife's voice only comes through in diaries, and she's missing and presumed dead. And then the twist is that she's not dead, and she faked the diary, and everything she wrote in it is a lie. So in part 2, we're in her point of view, and we see her, in hiding, keeping an eye on her husband and everything going on with the investigation into her disappearance and such. So you can't have that part of the book without knowing, seeing part 1 in a completely different light.
Right.
So, it was the middle of the book, but it was the end of part 1, and it was placed where it's essential to place it for the story the author was trying to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if a twist is driving the story, then it's going to happen where it most makes sense for that particular element of the plot arc.
Right.
And I suppose the only time you'd be wary of it, and maybe this is where the discussion, Kathryn, you were coming across, where people thought that surprise endings were twists, is there's a danger in having it too late if the things that led up to the twist don't make sense, and then it becomes more like a Deus Ex Machina twist, which is just thrown in to make the ending surprising, which some people might like. That would be
a gimmick.
Exactly. That would be a gimmick. Exactly.
Yay!
That's right. The Greeks called it Deus Ex Machina, but we just call it a gimmick.
That's right.
Boo!
God thing coming down, putting everything to right.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that you'd have to be a lot more careful about it if the twist came very close to the climax, that it wasn't just some kind of, I don't know, it has to make sense still, doesn't it? Because one of those sort of so-called rules of crafting a plot is that once you pass that second point of no return, then everything that occurs from there on shouldn't really be as a result of new information coming in. It's supposed to be dealing with everything we've built up so far. So if the twist then suddenly relies on something new coming in at the last minute, it better be damn good, and maybe relate to something that was seeded or foreshadowed right at the start.
Right. Well, we've given, I think most of the examples we've given and of, the concepts we've talked about would place the twist right at that point of no return at the end of Act 2, because it's the big revelation that leads us into the climax. But then we have, like the book you mentioned, Kathryn, and I Am Legend also, where the twist comes at the very end, and it closes the story. It makes you re-examine the whole. And then, of course, Gone Girl places it in the middle, but that's because the book is divided into those different movements with different point of view characters. So ultimately, you're going to have to place it where it makes sense for your story. You don't want it to come too early and, give away too much, and you don't want it to come too late and be anticlimactic, or so it's just kind of do it by feel. But I'd say if there's a general guideline, it's going to be the end of Act 2.
So the next question I have is that it seems like this almost feels almost genre to specific to like mysteries, thrillers, that sort of thing. Like, how can you use twists in something that isn't that kind of a feel of a story?
Well, I mean, the same way you would in a mystery or a thriller. I mean, it's the same concept and it's the same story craft.
Maybe they're just more readily accessible in our memory in that genre. Yeah,
like you might have a story. You mentioned Atonement, which I haven't read, but from what you described about it, if the sister who sent the boyfriend to jail grows up and realizes she lied, so maybe that lie was hidden from the reader until the character's point of revelation. That would be a twist.
Okay.
Right? Like, I haven't read Atonement. I'm not saying this is how it was done. But
It's
say
not,
you,
but that would be the twist.
right, like say you've got a literary novel where a character is dealing with some sin of her past, something she did as a child, maybe caused, someone else's death accidentally. And then years later, toward the end of the book, realizes, oh, what I thought happened, what I told myself happened, what my parents and therapists let me believe happened wasn't right. That's not what really happened. There's your twist. So it could be more of an internal psychological twist, but it's going to have profound ramifications on the character, the plot, and the reader's understanding of everything that's come before.
Okay.
And also perhaps it's because in the murder mystery, it's one of the genre conventions. It's going to be hard to have a really good murder mystery without some kind of twist in there somewhere, because it's part of what the reader enjoys tracking down. And whether they're massively, spine-jolting things or not. Whereas in other books and other stories, maybe the twist is really just going to be a complication that adds to the overall story arc.
Right. Well, the twist has to force the reader to re-examine what she knows about the story thus far. So like in the mystery, I wouldn't say that a twist is a convention so much as leading the reader down multiple paths of potential villains, different possibilities. So by giving the reader choices, you may pick the right one, you may not, but you're always trying to hold simultaneously in your mind who did what, who was where when, who can I eliminate now, which, isn't going to create a twist necessarily. I don't know that we can say a twist is a convention in any genre because they're so hard to do well. They aren't done that frequently.
Maybe.
So you can find them anywhere. But, I think we should all go write stories with twists now just to
Definitely.
see if we can do it.
Do it artfully, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on the elusive twist? No, shaking heads.
Nope. Thank you for answering all of my questions.
Oh, yay. I'm glad we got to all of them. All right. Well, that is it for this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Thank you so much for listening. As always, and drop us a line, visit us on Facebook, rate and review us. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.